Banks Wise. How are you, sir?
Hey guys, I'm doing pretty well. Had an awesome Thanksgiving and enjoying the little "I can see you and you can see me" kind of thing.
It's
I feel as important as our guest must feel.
your head is about 5 times the regular size.
Oh, should I not get too close?
No, it's all good, man. And I think, for some people out there seeing you front on for the first time on YouTube here, which you can go out and subscribe and like all the videos and all that fun stuff, share them with your family. I think it'll be a little bit different and fun for them as well.
Cool. Yeah, I woke up this morning. Well, I woke up and did a bunch of things, and then I decided to go to my car, and I had a flat tire, which has been happening a lot lately. And I blame going up to see my friend Matt Gertler. I always get flat tires when I go up there to North Georgia.
I wonder if what is it? Just a bunch of construction going on in the Northeast, or is it just those dirty Appalachian people up there that just throw stuff out on the road? I'm kidding, of course.
I don't know. It's either around. So when I lived up there for his campaign, and I stayed up there another like 6 months after that, I got maybe like 3 or 4 flat tires.
Yeah.
But I also put like within that year, probably 30,000 miles on my car because of campaign stuff. So I just think it's around his house and his parents' house. His dad is in construction, so there are a lot of nails and things around.
Yeah. Good Thanksgiving though, huh? Yeah, I was going to say good Thanksgiving though. You guys had a good time. We were talking a little bit off air about how you fell asleep on the couch after having Thanksgiving dinner, and what you were doing was you were watching The Mandalorian.
Yeah, it is. It was Matt's 4th time seeing it, and I was like, no, we have to watch the first episode or I won't understand what's going on. But we fell asleep. A few of us watching that, all 3 episodes, and then the next day we watched episode 4, came out like right then.
Yeah,
and it was a lot of fun, man.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. We now have the cutest character in Star Wars is Baby Yoda.
Yeah. Have you seen everybody talking about how they basically just took the hair off of Gizmo and made him Yoda?
I did. I also saw the memes where it's what's that show where people take the paternity tests?
Yeah, it's the female gremlin and Yoda.
Female gremlin and Baby Yoda and.
Yeah, it's a fanciful. How am I saying that word correctly? Fanciful, fantastic. It is a great. I mean, my kids are having so much fun with this show, man. I can't even begin to tell you. Henry is just absolutely bonkers about it. I can't tell you how many times he's rewatched every episode there is. And now they're going back because they had kind of fallen off a little bit after The Last Jedi, and now they're going back and they're watching A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and it looks like what they had kind of not been all that into in recent years. It seems like it's coming back with a vengeance because of The Mandalorian.
Yeah, it's I've enjoyed the slow pace of the series. Instead of a move being rushed, there really is time to kind of get Mando's. Is that his name?
Mando? I think that's just an adoring nickname that who is it? Billy D. Williams that plays Creed in the Rocky series. He's I think that's his name. Anyway, yeah, I think that's kind of.
I just don't know what the character's name is. Did you see that there is an actor from The Big Bang Theory in there?
No, who is it?
Very early on.
No, who's the actor?
The driver of the whatever space thing to get back to his aircraft in that very snowy area where there's the monster that eats it.
Okay.
The driver there is one of the professors. The bald guy who does.
The rock guy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I did. They've snuck in a few things. I remember really liking the guy that the first guy that Mando picks up in for a bounty there when and he obviously he's searching around on the ship and he freezes him in carbonite. I forgot who that was, but I mean it was a great character. I was actually kind of hoping he was going to stick around for comedic relief or something like that. But
I could see that.
Yeah, I keep looking at these things. I thought the bot might stick around for comedic relief, the one that's also out to get the Baby Yoda, and I thought some of these, it doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot of supporting cast in any of this, for every episode. It looks like this is going to be kind of a quote unquote solo type show for the Mandalorian guy, and he's just going to have his little adventures around the galaxy.
Yeah, I've definitely enjoyed it. I hope we haven't done any spoilers. I don't think we have.
No.
But highly recommended and well played on Disney's part. As much as like there's nothing intrinsically good about this non-entity Disney, like behemoth, but they will respond to what people want. And especially when they're trying to get people onto their platform, I wonder how many people bought into Disney Plus just because of The Mandalorian.
I don't know, man, but I got to tell you, I'm definitely impressed, and I hope they continue to do things like this. Jon Favreau, the guy that created Iron Man and really brought Marvel Studios to where it is now, he's actually in control of the Mandalorian project. So, probably some really good things to come out of that whole thing.
Cool.
Yep.
So if you have some free Disney Plus passwords and logins, just send them my way.
I'll send them your way. Hey, but we do have I think what's probably going to be a pretty juicy show for you guys. We've talked about kind of getting away from politics. That's really not going to happen in this show. We're going to dive squarely into politics in this one. But I think probably, getting into the holidays and all that kind of stuff, we're going to lighten the mood a little bit with more things like, Banks and I talking about some of the things that are away from us. I think I have an announcement to make here in the very near future in terms of some extra content for you guys. I've finally come up with, I think, a show name that I wanted to run by Banks off air. And really, I'm super excited about it. I'm super excited about what it lends itself to, and maybe we'll cover that in Monday's show next week, and we'll go from there. But today, Banks, you brought to my attention earlier, there was a little article out there where Clarence Thomas came out and kind of threw some people into that racist Ku Klux Klan group out there, and I haven't heard anything about this. I've totally unplugged everything during the holiday and just said, you know what, I don't need to watch any of this kind of stuff right now. I need to kind of be present in the moment and spend a little extra, great time with my kids and my family. So anyway, what do you got there?
Yeah, so the clickbaity title worked completely on me. It says Clarence Thomas compares modern day liberal to a Klansman in new film, and it scrolled through my Facebook at some point, and I clicked on it. I think it was on Cake, the music band. I still follow them. All they post is stuff like this.
Yeah. And
I scrolled through the comments, and they were just livid, just angry as hell. And I think the comment by Cake was something like MAGA. The greatest ? And then sarcasm in parentheses.
Mm-hmm.
And even before reading the article, I just wondered, okay, is that a fair thing? Is that just to add more fuel to the fire? Turns out that it's about this new documentary that Clarence Thomas was in that talks about when he was attacked and they tried to get him off the Supreme Court because of allegations from Anita Hill, I think is her name.
Yeah.
Of sexual misconduct and so forth. And he's making the comparison or the argument that it's not the bigot in the pickup truck or the Klansman or the rural sheriff that was actually going to be the biggest impediment to upholding what he says are his interpretation of morals and ethics in the Constitution. But it is the modern day liberal that is akin to the Klansmen. Like that is actually the scarier thing to pay attention to than actually the calls of what you see in movies and what you see the SJWs talk about and so forth.
All the forced moral outrage, basically, in terms of, I hate to even call them liberals, progressives out there in the socialist progressive type movement on the Democratic side is what he's saying. It sounds like. Yeah,
and then he says a different statement. He says, "Do I look stupid? Do I have stupid written on the back of my shirt? I mean, come on, we all know what this is about. It's about power." Right, getting him out, and if you can't get him out, undermining him as most efficiently as you can, and that's the same thing they're doing with Trump. And of course, here is my kind of party pooper analysis of this. The second comment I think is straight on. I think it's really important for people to acknowledge and see that it's about power, right?
Oh, everything now.
They don't actually care about the substance. They just first they've got an agenda, and then they go and pick out things that can suit that agenda. And when you're doing that, you usually like if the parallel with truth is not really happening there, right? Mm-hmm. Because your bias, I know they talk about bias a lot. Your bias is that you're trying to the ends justify the means because you got your goal in mind and not the truth in mind. And we would find that destructive. The other part, the clickbaity, what made the clickbaity title that I clicked on because I was like, oh, well, this is more fuel to the fire, I think is doing exactly what the other side does, right? Which is, as you say it often, like taking it to 100 and just never stopping.
Yeah.
And when you take it to 100 and never stop, you tend to have to. You still try to take it higher, right? It's like a heroin addict. It's like I need more to get that fix,
right,
or to get the outrage. Like you're giving drugs to the people basically. And when you start exaggerating and you miss nuance, now I know nuance can make things boring. Like I might sound a little boring right now, but when you miss all nuance, I think you really let the other side discredit you. And so as much as I've seen some people post this and find it really funny, and there's a ton of place for humor in lots of things, I think it's kind of sad because it lets the other side discredit us so much by saying, oh, whoa. And there's a clear difference between a Klansman, even if they don't really exist in our modern world, and somebody who wants to burn crosses and string up people based on their skin color, and a political fight as defunct of any principle as it is.
Sure.
So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention.
Yeah.
What's your opinion? So
I wouldn't equate them to modern day Klansmen at all. I see them more in the vein of the Nazi socialists, man. I really do. These people that would absolutely go out and use force against other people that disagreed with their ideology, and you see it across all types of centralized government control, where when things get so terrible because of your terrible economic Keynesian type economic policy, where you have to tax or fine or license or permit anything and everything that everybody does, just so that you're not cutting back on the spending and you can spend more all the time. I think that's indicative of what happens when governments just get to the end of their life cycle, so to speak. Okay. And so with these same types of, mental midgets here in the United States, what we've got is people who are willing to go out and commit crimes of, basically, I don't want to call it a crime of passion because that's actually a legal, definition. But it is. They're passionate about their socialism. They're passionate about, how they think the fascists are taking over. And hey, listen, I've said it recently too, that I do believe that there is a wing of the Republican Party, the GOP, that is also completely sacrificed all principle for power. They've even kind of shed the facade, and I hate to say it, but if you guys are out there in that MAGA crowd and you're pro Trump, you look at what just happened in this last week, where you've got the president reauthorizing the Patriot Act again, and you've got call for red flags. You've got the, instated AG Barr, who's all about red flags and ramping things up and, addressing the police forces and telling them that they have to be complied with first and then we can do justice later and those kind of things. Like, yeah, I believe they're kind of fascist, but at the same time, these socialists who are going out there and committing, atrocities and violence against people who disagree with them, who are not open to discussion, who meet open discussion with violence. I think there is something to be said. I don't think they're akin to the KKK, but I do see them in a more historical lens, more in line with those people that have in history, committed just the largest atrocities that we've seen in the past century. So yeah, I definitely I won't echo what he's saying. I think he's just off by a certain strain is all it is.
Yeah, I guess that's the same problem. And we've probably talked about this before, but it's if you support Trump no matter what, or if you support Obama no matter what, it gives the other side, the same point I just made, so much. I mean, it's so easy to discredit you because you're like, really 100%? They're infallible. They're perfect in every way. The twinkle of your eye. Like how is and so how do we make people comfortable with embracing nuance and embracing and getting away from thinking that it's so binary? Because that is, we're giving the other side the tool to be like, and they say it rightly. Both sides say it rightly. The hyper left progressives can rightfully say to the MAGA crowd, hey, you guys are insane because you're not telling the truth. And the truth is Trump is not perfect. And the MAGA crowd can rightly say to the other side, hey, you guys are insane because the people you support are being hypocrites, which is true as well because, well, the left is not actually anti-war. The left is actually also hypocrites that take money from big corporations, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, they're all the same. That's the thing is, I mean, you crushed it when you said, hey, they've sacrificed all principle now for power, and like I've had discussions just recently before I put everything away about this very thing. I said, you guys aren't constitutionalists anymore. That's why I left, man. And to see these guys out there that, are rah Republican, and we've got this thing going on here in Georgia right now where Brian Kemp is supporting, somebody that the MAGA crowd can't stand. And it is blown up. Brian Kemp is our governor. We're having a senator replaced. Johnny Isakson is leaving office a little short term because of some, he's old as hell and he's got some health problems and he should have been out a long time ago anyway. But, there are this consternation right now. Now you've got Brian Kemp, who was endorsed, obviously, by Donald Trump, who's sitting there saying, hey, listen, I think we're going in this other direction. And, people who are kind of like, well, no, Doug Collins needs to be the appointee. And this I don't know, this eating of their own right now. I am relishing in this.
I don't think it's actually eating of their own. I think it is the same thing, literally, where we didn't plan this, but it is the same thing that we just talked about right before, which is the two sides which can't see outside of the propaganda.
Right.
Now these two sides have been, it's either this choice or that choice. How many people put in an application? So what we're talking about is Brian Kemp asked for applications from anybody really who was qualified to be appointed to the U.S. Senate seat. How many people put in applications? And
I think it was like 5,000.
By random coincidence, it happens so that there be only two. And part of the MAGA crowd is like, no, we need Doug Collins, which is basically another establishment person. And the other side of the crowd is, no, we need what is her name? Kate Loeffler?
Something like that, yeah.
Something Loeffler, which is also establishment. And then you've got two sides fighting within the same party, kind of, who are both fighting for an establishment candidate, but they think there's a big difference because they've been told there's only two choices. Stop thinking that there's only two choices.
But Banks, the evil other party will win.
But this is funny. It's not even the evil other party. It's that some MAGA people are here and some MAGA people are here.
No, well, that's what I'm
saying. They're just waiting for a system. Maybe your tagline that we came up during your campaign is actually more important than we thought. Leadership matters. And what that means is don't just follow any random. You're waiting for somebody to give you something. When you wait for somebody to give you something and set up a narrative, you will lose all power. You will lose part of yourself if you let other people set up frameworks for you. And sometimes this is fine. If you're playing, I don't know, like pick up like football and you're waiting for two people to want to be the captains and pick people, then there's not many consequences. But if you're waiting for people to set up the framework in which you have freedom, and they take that freedom and reduce it to two options and a very simple framework of we're above you and anything we say you have to do, which is basically what we have today. It's an effective authoritarian government of sorts, then those consequences are going to be much less liberty and more authoritarianism.
Yeah, it's absolutely a false paradigm. I made this point to somebody earlier in the week as well. Is listen, you guys are working from this paradigm. It's an either or, right? And the argument on the lady who is in the top two, I guess, to be appointed here in Georgia for that senator seat, it's that she won't be able to raise the money and she won't be able to beat the Democrats, and you're going to basically hand the Democrats. Guys, there's a third choice here. There is a third choice. There are, and this thing is there's not just a third choice. There's a ton of different choices in what you can do and what you can't do. You don't have to give either one of those people your vote. I actually encourage you to come over to the Libertarian Party, especially the Mises Caucus right now. I am in active recruiting right now. There is a push. I hope you will join me. If you've seen that the Republicans are just as full of it as their counterparts on the quote-unquote left, let's just call them all statists. If you see them all as statists, because let's face it, the economy has grown. If you saw the tweet by Thomas Massey, every 10 years, the economy or the deficit here in America, or the debt in America has grown. Not deficit, debt has grown by twofold every 10 years since 1988. So the Congresses have both been controlled by Republicans and Democrats. The executives have been controlled by the Republicans and Democrats almost equally at this point. And you're sitting here going, there's no damn difference anymore. You can still have an option out there and do something different. Don't give any of them your vote and start fighting the system from a different angle. I invite you guys. There are links all over my Shane Hazel for Congress page and all that fun stuff. I don't know if I've put any on the Rebellion website yet, but listen, you don't have to vote for any of these chuckleheads. You don't have to be part of their system. You don't have to be part of their parties. You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff. If you want to, disrupt some Republicans and Democrats from the inside, I understand that. But if you want to come out and really be, who you are and stop, tiptoeing through the tulips with these people, man, I definitely invite you out and encourage you. I'll send links out later, but come on and help us out, because we have to stop this binary choice, paradigm, misunderstanding out there, and start having people really understand what our choices are as, hopefully free men and women.
So Shane, and you're free to say no, I would actually like to read some stuff from Facebook from one of our common friends who we disagree with on this sometimes. No need to mention names,
sure.
But he made an argument, and there were a lot of responses on there that I thought went in the right direction. And I think it's important, especially not only to understand everybody who participates in politics that affects you, like what they're thinking and how they come to conclusions, even if conclusions are bad, but
sure.
Especially people who you would call friends or allies to whatever degree.
Yeah.
So our friend, he's talking to me, but it doesn't really matter. But he says, and this is what the argument he'd make to anybody saying this. I posted something. I just said, we must do nothing. The argument was we have to choose, right?
Yeah.
We must do nothing. A binary choice is a false premise. A representative who has voted to increase the national debt, violate the Fourth Amendment, and continue unconstitutional wars is not an unacceptable choice. This is speaking out against Doug Collins. I wouldn't choose either, but there's those people who are like, no, we need to choose.
It's got to be this.
Choose Doug Collins because he's the MAGA guy and Loeffler isn't. And our friend says some choices are binary. That in of itself is true, just not this one. I really don't believe you take political matters seriously. You play at this like it is a game in which contrarians win by rejecting anything that is real. I expect that's because you know that hardly anything you call for politically will succeed, and hardly anyone you advocate as a candidate will ever win. So I guess I really don't blame you. But you do not seem to gather that we live in a republic, or perhaps you do not understand what it means. It means that you as an individual do not get to select the people's representatives. The people as a whole do. It means your ideology is not superior to that collective will of the people. It means you are not right when you disagree with the will of the people. It means the will of the people, not the will of any individual, is right. The will of the people is never wrong. The will of the people carries authority even when the people do not agree with your ideological political preferences and view of the world. The people are always right. It's always means you have the same input as every other individual, no more, no less. Now, he wrote much more, but
yeah,
this stuff. So again, I like this individual. He's a friend. I think he's wrong on many, many things, but I do like to understand where he's coming from. And as much as we'd like to pick it apart and show you all the complicated math behind it, I don't think it's that complicated. I think it is from some kind of emotion of fear or hope or whatever mix, because those are the two like basic ones, basically. That was kind of redundant. But he's bought into the system of government being valid, that democracy, he says republic, but he's talking about democracy, because he's talking about how a majority is right all the time. And he says it multiple times. And the problem with that is, just looking back in history, if you look at certain periods of time where I'm not talking about the majority, I'm talking about the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, right, of people thought certain things were good that were absolutely wrong, or certain things were normal that were absolutely repugnant. We're talking about slavery and individuals of one skin color or one creed being intrinsically
religion. Whatever.
Intrinsically more important than another, then you can just point at that. And if the truth is a constant, and I believe that there is no way that our friend could not acknowledge that the truth is objective. Okay, I don't think most people are that far lost. If the truth is consistent, then you can just constant. You can just look at the past and say, hey, no, the will of the people, which is starting to be annoying to me as a term. I've read it so much. The will of the people is not always right. It doesn't matter. I mean, you see it. It's funny how we'll accept it in other ways. We'll accept it in like the Matrix movie. We'll accept it in memes. There's that meme where it's a bunch of Nazis and they're all giving the salute, and there's that one guy who's not giving the salute. It's got like a circle around him. It says, "Be that guy." This is literally what we teach our children. What we find in the inspiration in movies, right? It's part of Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
They're a small rebel minority who are fighting for the right things. I've heard people say that they're actually the bad guys, but that's another argument. And so it's as simple. It's not complicated. It's as simple as he's bought into it for whatever emotional reason. And I don't mean to call him an emotion. Like, I think emotions are actually somewhat important. And I don't mean to call him just emotional, not logical, but that's all he's saying. And then he adds on to the end of his argument something that is categorically accepted unless people are under cognitive dissonance. Hank has, I use Hank has accepted it at other times, saying that it also means you have the same input as every other individual, no more, no less. Anybody with an ounce of being awake, okay, that's all you need.
Consciousness.
And consciousness, that's a better word, knows that there are people who have much more influence than other people. And we complain about it all the time. The left complains about the fact that Russia or Ukraine or
the fact that we have or the fact that we have what's the body that elects the presidents, the Electoral College. They hate.
College?
Yeah.
And the right is always complaining about liberal bias and the media and so forth. And I'm sure we've done on both sides. There's true things to take into account there. And so I think that just destroys his argument. And of course, there are many more absurdist ways to push back against his argument. There's a guy on here that made a great argument. He said something about, where was it? It was great. Oh, so he says, so if the will of the people was to execute all brown-eyed people, would that be right? Might is right. We would not have a constitution in that case, or our founders were but a tiny minority of people. No more than 30% even supported them. The will of the people will always be wrong if it goes against the will of God. And I think that's a great way to push back against his argument as well.
Yeah, Banks, you nailed it with the first statement. This is a republic. Yeah, you know what? It once upon a time was. Did we keep it? Hell no, we didn't keep it. We've turned into this arbitrary, weird, bureaucratic nightmare of an empire. That's what I want to, like, we are an empire now, and it's gonna fall. It's gotta fall. It's what empires do. If you're looking at history, what do empires do? They conquer a whole bunch of people, they kill and enslave and just do terrible, awful, damn things in this world. Throughout history, we've turned into something exactly, to the description of an empire. We are in no way a republic. And what he is describing, you're dead damn right. It's a democracy. So if 51%, and that's the thing is, if you make that argument to them, well, 51%, can they take away your ability to defend yourself? Well, in Hank's eyes, of course they can. It's the most ridiculous damn argument there is. And, and then we get into things like the 9th and 10th Amendment where, all rights that are not specifically codified in the Constitution still belong to the people. And then obviously the delegated powers that are not specifically delegated to the federal government are reserved to the states and to the people themselves in their counties. I think... I think this misunderstanding and bastardization comes from being extremely proud. It's not that we just support things that will never, ever happen. We're the only people not using force. And that's the thing is, when you look at what we want, we don't get what we want because we aren't using force and we're peaceful people to begin with. He's bought into this, religion of Donald Trump being the damn messiah at this point. And will do anything and that's the thing is, I never, ever, ever, ever hear any of these MAGA people criticize Trump over anything. And it's so reminiscent of the people on the other side, this binary duopoly crap hole that we've got, of doing the same thing with Barack Obama. When you guys never criticize him about anything, he's over there, droning the hell out of people more than anybody in history, and you guys don't say anything about it. Where's the pro peace left? It's like, where the hell is the Austrian right at this point? It's all the same crap. It's they kill, they bomb, they take more, they abuse us, and at the same time, I mean, now they've ramped up surveillance again through the Patriot Act. It's just like, or I should say, at least continued it. Man, yeah, I yearn and will be working my ass off to expose not only that's what that is, but there are other choices out there. And for people that are just so far down this MAGA worship, I'll tell you right now, you better think about what you're doing, because I know a lot of you guys consider yourself Christians, and right now what you guys are doing is falling on this false altar, basically, to hold up a man that really, is he worth it? Is he worth this, being this person that you sacrifice principle for power for? That's the biggest question. Are you guys going to go along with this just for power? Because if you are, you're going to get corrupted. People are going to see through you. And then any argument that you have after that, it's going to be delegitimized. And I, for one, I don't even take these guys seriously anymore. That's the problem. I know they're relevant, and I believe they are relevant, but in terms of serious discussions, the mental gymnastics these guys are doing and having the intestinal fortitude to actually sit there and say, I was wrong, I am wrong about this dude or this caucus or whatever it is, I don't see it anywhere, man. And in very, very small places, for sure, within the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think it's the only thing I would come back on there is that it's dangerous to lump everybody together for the purpose of having a conversation. Sometimes you have to say the liberals or the progressives or et cetera. In general, I just want to focus on the ideas. But there are some people who will just say when Trump does something good and say when Trump does something bad. And some of those people decide to embrace the MAGA thing, to influence it, and they'll say MAGA, but they'll also call out Trump. The best example that I know of that's close to us would be our one of our favorites, Stewart Jones, who wrote a letter to Trump saying, hey, stop with the red flag BS. It's dangerous. It goes against the Constitution. And now he just introduced the Second Amendment Preservation Act, which basically is a mirroring of the law that I believe passed in Idaho, saying all federal laws after the 1st of January, I think it is 2020, that have to do with guns are just null and void because we don't trust the federal government.
Right.
Which is which is probably a pretty smart thing to do. But at the same time, he will also post about the fact that Trump says, hey, we need less wars and so forth. Now, that's a whole discussion that you've heard us talk about many times, that, well, the follow through on that is not as there as we'd want it to be. But I think there is a strategy there, and I hope that he will lead people to be able to be comfortable, because that's what it's some kind of fear. Like, if the truth is a subjective and consistent and constant, then it's some kind of fear or emotion that's taking people away from it.
Yeah.
Because the truth is good. So I hope he helps people feel comfortable slowly saying, hey, I wish Trump hadn't done this, and I wish Trump hadn't done that. And even though I think that Doug Collins is just as bad, maybe worse.
Reprehensible. Reprehensible.
Kelly Loeffler? Man, I don't know. Katie, Kelly, something Loeffler. I'm not trying to be disrespectful there. Like, I wouldn't mind if they would make an argument within their context saying, hey, I think this candidate is better, rather than saying there's only two choices. This is the only way to do it. Trump cannot make a wrong decision in who he supports. It is impossible, so we just have to follow what he says to the letter, because that's it.
Hey, heads up, Republicans, from the New American Freedom Index, Doug Collins has a 60%. I don't know what this other lady would have out there, but at the same time, you're talking about people who aren't even going to approach a D in terms of constitutional voting records. That's what you're arguing about, you jackasses. You're arguing about people who don't give a damn about the Republic or the Constitution. It's just power at this point, and supporting your boy in the White House for 4 more years. It's pathetic. It's absolutely driven me so far away from the GOP that I'm just done, man. And obviously, I will reserve warm places in my heart for those people like Banks Wise and Matt Gertler and those people here in Georgia, or Nick Freitas and Thomas Massey. I will reserve some places in there for the heroes within that circle that have somehow managed to stay there and continue to do it. I don't know how you guys are. It's like battered wife syndrome or Stockholm syndrome at this point. But I'm done with these guys, man. And that's the thing. You guys are fighting over You guys are fighting over people who rate Fs for constitutional, backing. And so I don't know. It just flat on its face. It is exactly what it is. But yeah, Clarence, I think. All the way back in the beginning of the discussion, I think he's wrong about who these people are. I think I think it's much worse than people, that just hate people for skin color. I think these guys are all about an idea on a fringe and are willing to sacrifice anybody that gets in the way. So I think it's much worse than what Clarence Thomas actually thinks it is. But
nice way to wrap it up. I would give all the praise to most of the people in the Republican Party who are not known, and that would include me, by the way, even though you were kind enough to say my name. So just all the activists who go there with the most purest of intentions, or all the people who vote because they've decided that is what they think is the best outcome for LibGen on that day.
Yeah.
But yeah, what do you want to talk about next?
So I think we just had a really nice segue open up for us because right now our buddy Rep. Stewart Jones over in South Carolina has already pre-filed a bill for next year that I always find really cool, because one of the major things that we obviously always talk about in these circles is not only Austrian economics, but it's fiscal responsibility and the understanding of money itself. So Rep. Stewart Jones over in South Carolina, he's been on the show. The last time, I think it was episode 121, where we actually talked about that red flag bill red flag letter that he and a group of South Carolina lawmakers sent up to the president. This is out of the libertarianinstitute.org. South Carolina Legal Tender Act would treat gold as silver and silver as money. A bill pre-filed in the South Carolina House would make gold and silver coins legal tender in the state. Passage of this bill would take a step toward creating currency competition in South Carolina and undermine the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money. Rep. Stewart Jones filed the bill 4678 H4678 on November 20th under the proposed law, quote, gold and silver coins minted foreign or domestic shall be legal tender in the state of South Carolina under the laws of this state. No person or other entity may compel another person or entity to tender or accept gold or silver coins unless agreed upon by the parties, end quote. Practically speaking, this would allow South Carolina residents to use gold or silver coins to pay taxes and other debts owed to the state. In effect, it would put gold and silver on the same footing as the Federal Reserve notes. The phrase, unless agreed upon by the parties, has important legal ramifications. This wording reaffirms the court's ability and constitutional responsibility according to Article 1, Section 10 to require specific performance when enforcing such contracts. If voluntary parties agree to be paid or to pay in gold and silver coin, South Carolina courts could not substitute any other thing, e.g. Federal Reserve notes, as payment. South Carolina could become the fourth state to recognize gold and silver as legal tender. Utah led the way, reestablishing constitutional money in 2011. Wyoming and Oklahoma have since joined. The effect has been most dramatic in Utah, where the United Precious Metals Association, UMPA, was established after the passage of the Utah Specie Legal Tender Act and the elimination of all taxes on gold and silver. UPMA offers accounts dominated in U.S. minted gold and silver dollars. The company also recently released the Utah Goldback. UPMA describes it as the first local voluntary currency to be made of a spendable, beautiful physical gold. So I'll stop there for now. I think this is awesome. Stewart, man, if you're out there and you're listening, brother, geez, oh, Pete, you're killing it, dude. I mean, absolutely crushing it out there. And, you know, the fact that you get to do it as a Republican up there and you're making a difference the way you are, geez, oh, Pete, great job. Kudos to you. Hats off. Banks, what are your thoughts initially on Stewart putting this, you know, big old thorn right in the Fed's eye?
So my first thought is that I could have guessed that this is one of the bills he would have introduced. There's probably about like 20 bills that are on the top of his list, that are on the top of any Liberty person's list. And of course, every representative has only a certain amount of time and effort and energy that they can actually put forward, right? Like any individual. And so they have to focus. So you've got some who have focused on Second Amendment stuff and some who have focused on civil asset forfeiture stuff. And this is one that gets a little bit less attention, but I think is just as important as anything else. And the main reason is competition, right? If you have a monopoly, and as much as we'd like to live in a more free world where maybe more of the courts and more of the free market wasn't regulated by government, but it is now. And the courts in the free market, we have laws that say that, well, the US dollar is what has to be paid for in debts. It's the only thing that can be accepted and that can be in contracts. Because I guess you can accept other things, but to have the court like back you up, like the US dollar is the only thing.
Right.
That means that effectively the US dollar has a monopoly. And as much as you think that money might just be this magical thing that we use, it is actually a product and service just like anything else.
Sure.
Okay. In my opinion, it is a pretty poor performing product and service, especially if you look at the inflation that has happened over the past 100 years. I think the dollar has lost about 93 or 97% of its value.
I think it's like 97, 98% now. Only 2 or 3% more to go. We're good.
And if you compare that to other things, for example, gold and silver, we've kept that value. And when you talk about value, you don't just talk about the fact that like what is a tangible thing. It's what you can buy with it. So you could buy, for example, there's this great thing to explain to other people why competition is important. If you take 4 silver quarters from back in, I think, 1930s, 1940s, you could buy a certain amount of gasoline with that. Now, if you take $1, 4 silver quarters, $1, you can buy like a third of a gallon or something.
Yeah.
But if you have the same amount of silver that was in those 4 silver quarters, you could buy the same amount of gasoline in gallons as you could back then.
Right.
That is something that keeps its value. And I don't know about you, Shane, but me, if I'm going to have something that represents value, so money, I'd prefer it keep its value than it lose its value. Well, if it loses its value, then I always have to play catch up and have to rig the system so I can outpace inflation, and it makes saving, which I think saving is a good thing. It makes saving less reward for, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is harmful to the economy, harmful to families, harmful for people who don't necessarily want to abide by the system. For example, if you're, I don't know, you save up your whole life, you buy a really nice house, and you decide that you just don't want to go on with the system anymore. You've bought this house, you just want to live on it. And even if you accept the premise of property taxes, you're like, okay, I've saved this amount of money, I can pay my property taxes till I die. If the money you're using to pay the property taxes, on top of all the other sins of our system, property taxes being one of the worst, if the money you save to pay those property taxes devalues, then you might have to lose your house. I mean, it's egregious, and I think that having a better monetary unit that is actually accepted by the world we live in would be great.
I think this is one of those things that people as a species has not cracked yet, and for those of you guys that are economically in tune, and I'm using the word species and all, that's it's not meant to be pun or funny or anything like that. It's just there's a great book out there. It's called A History of Money and Banking in the United States by Murray Rothbard. I think he wrote it back in like 2002. It is an interesting read because you see what has happened over the course of history here in the United States with the banks, bimetallism and things like that. And when you start to see how it's all transpired over the decades and the centuries now, I think it's one of those areas that humans have not gotten right. I think it's an exercise and a practice. When you've got bimetallism going on, so silver and gold, even in this country, right? What happens? What happens is if there is an easier, cheaper, or more rich supply of one of those types of metal, right? They're going to flood one way or another into the market, and then it cheapens the other one, right? And so over the course of history, this has happened in America, and I'm that person that's going, all right, we haven't really reinvented money. Blockchain is one of those things that I have my doubts about to begin with, just because you can't touch it, and I think anything where there is a ton of control in cyber right now, with all the bureaucracy here in America and China and around the world, I think they've, a digital currency still leaves tracks, right? And that's something that those guys want to know about and monitor and will keep track of. So I don't think we've really cracked it, but I still I will fall back into this, anytime that you do have silver, like you mentioned, it is one of those things where over time so far, it still buys the exact same thing that it did a century ago, if it was around, for instance. So I don't know. I don't know. I like Stewart Jones in terms of his thought process and everything else. I think this is an absolute win, and I hope it gets through their legislative session there in South Carolina this coming year. I think it's really cool. I'm not shocked that Georgia hasn't done it yet, because Georgia's not South Carolina. We've got this really progressive infestation down here of both left and right. Not so much liberty, And so I don't know. Maybe we'll get our stuff together and catch up. But kudos to South Carolina and Stewart Jones, man. Well done. I think it's really cool.
So Georgia has actually had this bill introduced years ago. I believe almost like 10 years ago.
Really?
By a gentleman who has now passed away, unfortunately, whose name is escaping me. I'm really embarrassed. I mentioned him before. He was there before we had the Ron Paul representatives, Charles Gregory, Sam Moore. Shout out to both of them.
Yeah.
For those not on video, I've got signs of theirs behind me, and Matt Gertler and so forth. Man, he's from Cobb County too. but I can't remember his name. I mentioned him before on the podcast, but he had introduced a legal tender bill. I know that our friend Bill Green had been involved in supporting that and had been involved in pushing that in Texas as well. But just to finish on the Stewart Jones thing, it reminds me of a great quote from Thomas Jefferson, where he says, "Paper is poverty. It is only the ghost of money and not money itself." Which, I mean, more just intrinsic knowledge and intrinsic truth from the founding fathers, as much as they were wrong about certain things. And then one thing from the bill, from Stewart's bill in South Carolina, that I noticed that I thought was really interesting, and really shows just how liberty he is, which we already knew, but the contrast is funny. If the establishment were to write this bill, and sometimes the establishment gets to places where they write bills about subjects we care about, right? They'll write a messed up version of constitutional carry or a perverted version of Dorn. I don't have another example, but they'll take an idea that we like and call it free speech, Second Amendment, and so forth, and just mess it up. Stewart shows how he is the real deal. Like, you can tell the difference between two people. You just have to make sure you pay attention to the details. And this line from the bill shows it. It says, "Gold and silver coins minted foreign or domestic shall be legal tender in this state." If the establishment was doing this, they would have put gold and silver coins minted domestically shall be legal tender in the state, because they put some intrinsic value in the state. Whether it's nationalism or the power or the desire to control and make sure it's ours, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's important somehow. Like, the value of gold changes because one person on one side of a border has minted it or not. And this just shows that probably Stewart had the foresight of thinking, what if the establishment, somebody else, makes an argument that, okay, this gold from outside here,
sure,
it doesn't have the same value because it didn't have, I don't know, an American stamp on it and wasn't under American regulation, American taxes, whatever silly stuff they come up with to make their arguments that to have more arbitrariness in this. He has had the foresight, or maybe he's just, liberty is so lives and the fire burns so strongly inside him that it just came out this way.
He's got the force.
Either way, kudos to Stewart for not acknowledging our arbitrary things that don't matter.
Yes, silly lines. Just a admin note on, was that Representative Jim Colby? Was that the guy who introduced the legal tender bill back in 2001, 2002?
It's not. Maybe there's somebody else who introduced it. It is.
That's Arizona. I'm sorry. No, that I saw that after I read it. And so, at any rate, but no, this is happening more and more across the United States. I mean, things in Texas, obviously, because of Bill Green. Thank God for happening.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You want to continue in the vein of states' rights and all this fun stuff right now?
Sure. I was actually. Earlier, I was going to say we always have perfect segues, and there I was at the loss for a segue.
Oh man,
into the next issue.
Instead of going international, I think because this is still on the East Coast, even in the South, I think this is big news, man. And this happened kind of going into the holiday, so it wasn't. I don't think it was as big as it could have been, but there's a couple of different articles that I want to point out. I just pulled the first one because I just wanted the fact on it. Not that Breitbart is a great place for that, but this is from Breitbart.com. Nearly 24 counties in Virginia have declared Second Amendment sanctuary status ahead of Democrats taking control of the state legislature in 2020. So gun control Democrats won the night November 5th, securing enough seats to take control of the Virginia legislature. On November 8th, Breitbart News reported that Governor Ralph Northam reacted to the victory by planning a war on guns. The war includes the implementation of numerous gun controls that have been in place in states like California for decades and have proven impotent to hinder, much less prevent, high-profile firearms-based attacks. On November 23rd, 2019, at Appomattox, Giles, and Dinwiddie counties each declared Second Amendment sanctuary status, but they are not the only ones. Apparently, there's 19 other counties up there that are joining them. I'll spare you guys that list. But I think this is really pretty interesting that this is happening, especially in a state like Virginia. that is as close to DC as possible. Now, the reaction out there from the gun-hating progressives is somewhat laughable and obviously calculated to a certain degree. But the WashingtonPost.com put out this article. It's called "Mischief Makers with an Agenda Promote Gun Sanctuaries in Virginia." What do you think, Banks? Where do you think this article is going?
So first thing, I love the title of that article because I think their agenda in this particular instance is more gun freedom, which is good.
Yeah.
I usually like misfits, and so I'm all for it. I think it's when you talk about the pendulum swinging from one side to the other, I think this is a great example of the pendulum swinging because it shows how, in general, the left and the establishment, so most people are against guns. So we've had a tide of more gun laws. We've got red flag laws and at 7+ states now. You've got the president talking about it. You've got One-Eyed Patriot talking about it. That's Dan Crenshaw, for you guys have forgotten.
One-Eyed Patriot.
And this shows how the pendulum swings because you can't abolish the truth because it always exists. And so because they've gone so crazy, right? Because especially the left has gone insane. You've got the Beto O'Rourke saying like, we're going to come for your guns. So the nature of things, like you've got this competition for power against over other people is bad, and fighting for power. They say these crazy truths that they actually think, but nobody had no like real respectable character on their side had said. They come out with that, and because of that, you've got the right, and not just like us on the right, the libertarians who have been saying this forever, right? Like you have the right to do whatever you want. Civil disobedience is the way to go. If you decide that it's your time to take a stand in your house or your county or wherever, that I'm just not going to take it anymore, then you should do that. But because it's gone so crazy, you've got more of the right that kind of has to accept this as a good thing, right? They can't push back against it because there's too many people who want it. Us who have been there forever, just saying the right line that hey, no, it's all an infringement on gun rights. But now you've also got the dynamic of, well, this is pushing against the crazy left. And so you've got those two groups. The crazy left, we have to fight against them. The people who've been saying the truth forever. And there's so many of us now that the people who aren't completely established and kind of just have to accept the fact that this is what's happening makes it politically feasible for politicians who usually don't want to take extreme views on anything, right?
Yeah.
Politicians, sheriffs, and the people in charge of counties feel comfortable doing this. I think that it's quite amazing because this is not what they would usually go to, and they would not even uphold the principle behind this consistently. They wouldn't say, oh, this also means that you shouldn't have to report to the state if you want to homeschool your kids. This shouldn't mean that you have to pay property taxes on because that violates the whole idea of private property. No, this is going to be confined to gun rights, but it's still cool that there's also that social pressure and this moment in time that makes it possible.
Yeah. Yes. A million times over. I want to read at least part of this article. When I tried to find an article, it just says by editorial board. That's how, I don't know, how feckless these people are in their writing. So it starts off, vigilantism, with its alluring tingle of defiance and frontier justice, conjures a cinematic idea of American individualism. A similar impulse is at work among advocates of so-called Second Amendment sanctuary movement, a trend that is mainly in rural counties declaring they will refuse to enforce restrictive state gun laws. Both are examples of individuals who, lacking legal authority, put themselves above the law, thereby promoting chaos. Oh, that's just the first paragraph, thanks.
I could have written the same paragraph, turned it on its head. Crazy vigilantes who want to control other people's lives, lacking all legal arguments, decide that they are going to use force and fear to make people comply with their stupid ideas.
I love it. It's so easy.
So I could have written it more adequately, but you get the idea. So it's whether you and I wish we could push them even further and say, hey, but what about natural law? And just confuse their brains and have an argument with this editorial board. I guess, I don't know who this editorial board is exactly. I wish I had a name, but I'd love to have the argument with the person say, oh, you think the law's on your side? No, the law's on our side.
Yeah, you're so wrong. I'll continue a little bit, but I think we've already encapsulated what the media is doing. And I see this as just more bald-faced. The facade is down. The emperor's got no clothes now, and it's just power and control, and we are going to either scare or force or intimidate. In terms of the war on terror, man, like, it's here in America now. Like, this is what what they've been practicing abroad for the last 2 decades. They are doing it here now within the country, and it's just bald-faced to me. It continues, in Virginia, the movement has lately become a fad, spurred by legislative election results that will, starting in January, hand pro-gun control Democrats control of both houses of the General Assembly for the first time in a generation. With a Democrat also in the governor's mansion, some rural Republicans are raising the specter of mass gun confiscations and pronouncing themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. The idea and the term itself has gained traction in Western states and elsewhere, inspired by sanctuary cities that have adopted policies barring cooperation with federal immigration officials to deport unauthorized immigrants. I'm going to stop on this one because it goes on. I want you to see, just in case you thought, though, like, this is where politics is going now. I feel like this contraction of liberty that empires must pull off to stay in power is ramping up, it's speeding up, and now what you're starting to see is this exactly. I think it's really fairly remarkable that you've got all these people that are out there pushing back. And I'll tell you right now, I would like to take this moment to rake over the coals my local sheriff again. That whole red flag thing where I was very curious about, hey man, where do you stand on red flags? If you don't know where your sheriff stands on red flags, you need to find out. This is why. Because if your commissioners won't enact it, your sheriff still has the executive authority to make sure that he is not withstanding in terms of, or I should say, should be within standing of the Second Amendment. This turns this all on its head, and I want to reference one other article in this whole thing. It comes from LouRockwell.com. This is fairly serious. This is actually by Mike Adams, because apparently the language itself in some of these bills that they want to propose is even more insidious than just gun confiscation. Banks, have you heard about the other implications out there?
You'll have to freshen my mind, but I probably have.
Yeah, so Virginia, this is quote unquote tyranny alert. Virginia to outlaw Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, Tai Chi, firearms instruction, and self-defense training under proposed law SB 64. Have you heard anything about this at all?
So I have my best analysis, and I could be wrong. By the way, the name of the representative is Bobby Franklin. You've heard it before. I said it before. I had to look it up again. Embarrassed. Yeah. But my best analysis is that this is a unfortunately smart political tactic, and the tactic is when you're trying to advance an agenda, you always ask for more than you want, things you don't care about, because the nature of the sausage factor, as they call it, is that once an idea is proposed, like, it never goes away completely. And so you just make it palpable to everybody so that the least amount of people are upset. So at first you'll have maybe like all the Krav Maga people, our friends, or people who do karate, or people who do jujitsu, the people who teach their kids and so forth, are just outraged, right?
Right.
And they're down there for the first time, and they're just banging their fists on the doors of the representatives. Unfortunately, it never happens that way. They go ask permission and say, please, please, please don't do this to me. And then you'll have a concession. Okay, we made this horrible idea good now, because we've taken out these things that I think they already knew were not acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can get some articles and some press and some word of mouth of, oh, well, no, it's not stop, you crazy person. It's not that bad. They fixed it. And then the crazy person we're not actually crazy, has to make the argument of, no, it was all an illusion. Stop. The bad things are still there. Unfortunately, politics doesn't work that way, and people are often fooled by this tactic. The side that still wants to fight against the bill because it's all bad, not just parts of it, can get a little bit demotivated because they've lost all that support they had a second ago because they had all the Krav Maga, Jiu-Jitsu, karate people in there with them. So I think it's just a tactic and not actually a real desire to ban Krav Maga.
I hadn't thought about it that way, but I don't know. When I look,
I'm also very cynical and have seen this happen many, many times. So that might be that.
Yeah. So the article reads: the state of Virginia obviously now run entirely by insane Democrats who support infanticide, child murder, is proposing a new 2020 law known as SB 64, which will be taken up by Democrats in the Senate beginning on January 8th of 2020. The law would instantly transform all martial arts instructors into criminal felons. That includes instructors who teach kickboxing, BJJ, Krav Maga, capoeira, whatever. It would also criminalize all firearms training classes, including concealed carry classes. It would even criminalize a father teaching his own son how to use a hunting rifle. Specifically, the law says that a person, quote, is guilty of unlawful paramilitary activity, in parentheses, a class 5 felony, if that person, quote, assembles with one or more persons for the purpose of training with, practicing with, or being instructed in the use of any firearm, explosive, or incendiary device or technique capable of causing injury or death to persons. The phrase, quote, technique capable of causing injury or death to persons, end quote, covers all forms of martial arts, self-defense training, including Krav Maga, BJJ, blah, 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 blah. Under the proposed law, all forms of self-defense training, including hand-to-hand martial arts training, would be considered paramilitary activity, even if the training consists of private classes involving just one instructor and one student. That's because every form of martial arts training imparts skills which could be used to cause injury to other persons. In fact, according to the language of the law, just one person learning such arts is a felony crime, which means that watching a DVD on Krav Maga would be a felony crime. Is that not nuts?
So apparently what myself and the Gertler family were doing over Thanksgiving, we shot a bunch of guns and like run some drills and so forth, would have been high felonies. But it's insane. And as much as I just made my argument, I reminded the other day I was listening to a podcast that made a really good point about how you shouldn't attribute to malice what you can attribute to stupidity. And so as much as I think there's probably both when we hear bad ideas and bad bills,
yeah,
like this could be either. It could either be complete morons or complete like evildoers.
Well, I think it's a combination,
and probably
right?
One, I would imagine the evildoers sometimes propose and use the morons, and sometimes the morons just propose and the evildoers won't let that go to waste.
Well, yeah, it's like a Hillary Clinton leading Sheila Lee Jackson along, right? Come on, hey, I got this really cool idea. Come on, stupid, let's go do this thing, right? And they're useful idiots, and I don't say stupid like they're ignorant, right? Sheila Lee Jackson's stupid, like that lady's got just maybe a marble rolling around up there that's dusty in the mud or something. But yeah, man, I agree with you. There are definitely some people who this would be the perfect bill to start, rounding people up, felonies and all that kind of stuff. It's very, it's very 1939 Germany. And
no, I think there would be way too much pushback to call it the perfect bill. I think that because of how open our world is today, that's why the strategy from those who are more malicious than stupid is the slow burn. So
I'm just the internet kind of, I think this lost traction a little bit because I mean, to see this, and when I say perfect, what I mean by that is in their world, of kumbaya, where evil doesn't exist and people don't harm each other and things like that, which I I would love to see, but I would still want people armed. The ability to use force is reserved to the all-powerful state for them, and that's the thing is all these statists that think that only people in government should be able to train and use force, like I don't know where these people grow up. I don't know, how their lives, get to this point where they don't understand, any history. I understand, obviously, it's probably mostly the government indoctrination system, but yeah, I'm at a loss for some of these things, and I don't know. I think it's really interesting what's happening in a lot of the counties and states in America right now, where everybody's just like, enough is enough, man. Like we've got to start, implementing some things here. I'm actually going to probably meet with one of our commissioners here in Forsyth County next week to start discussing some of these things, because I don't know, man. I think it's probably a time to where people start standing some ground and say enough is enough, and if that's one of those things that, you can help out locally with your commissioners and your sheriff, you should do it. You should definitely do it. Apply as much political
what's
pressure.
Funny is I would guess, I'd bet a little bit of money, not a lot, but a bit of money, that if you put your sheriff, Ron Freeman, in one of those counties in Virginia that is more rural and more Republican, he would probably sign off on the idea of sanctuary gun counties, because
it's politically expedient.
Well, it's just acceptable, and so somebody who is well put together and doesn't make waves when he knows better, just because, well, he doesn't seem stupid, and because people have brought things to his attention. That's just what they do. That, like, the government and being in government will corrupt your mind and will make you do things that a normal person wouldn't do, that a normal person behind closed doors, like, doesn't act the same way, doesn't talk the same way. It is a weird world that I think in some ways is coming apart. So you have people being more of themselves. Like, as much as I don't like Bill Clinton, he was like, oh yeah, I smoked, I didn't inhale. And then we go to the next step. You had the Obama
wait, George Bush.
Bush didn't. I was going to make a joke. You kind of ruined my joke. I was going to say Obama, then go back to Bush. Well, Bush was like, okay, we can do cocaine. He didn't actually say that. We just all knew it.
Yeah, because he got arrested for it, didn't he? I mean, at some point or another, wasn't George Bush arrested for coke?
Not that I know of. I think it's just like
definitely DUI,
but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, he had a misspent.
If he got arrested, I would imagine he wouldn't actually have a record because powerful family.
The Bushes.
But then you have Obama, who's like, there's pictures of me out there, like, smoking a joint. And people, because of how open the world is, having to just be more comfortable being themselves. But we are far, far, far from it.
Yeah.
And every time I talk to, especially, like, our friends who were in the trenches during the Ron Paul movement, and we talk about, like, who's good and who's bad. We got, like, the Matt Girdlers are good and the Johnny Isaacsons are bad. There's these people in the middle who are what we would say, like, our friends, people we like spending time around, who believe in liberty, but who, when they were a representative, or if they're still a representative, are not themselves.
Yeah.
They don't talk the same way. They don't express the ideas they believe the same way. But behind closed doors, you'll have them jumping up and down on couches being like, damn that governor with his big budget.
Cowards.
And yet in front of the governor, they'll just quiver and beg and hope, and hopefully that is changing.
Yeah, I think it is, man. I mean, and I'll tell you, I feel very liberated in terms of, not having to mince words at all anymore. It is a great feeling. We know
you feel liberated. So crazy libertarian.
So nice to fit in with a group of people who want you around, and then also agree on the principles of liberty.
For the most part, there's still disagreements.
Yeah. That's because we had people infect the party for a while. I think that's going to come to an end in 2020 for the most part, anyway.
Have we found a Sarwark vaccine?
Yeah, I think it's Josh Smith is the name of the vaccine. It's going to be awesome. Banks, we've been doing Skype here for about an hour and 15 minutes, and
Of course you have.
at some point it's gotten, and I say very few times, it's gotten a little grainy. So we may be pushing our luck a little bit here. Is there anything
A
else
little grainy on my part.
I don't know. I don't know if it's your part or my part, but everything's great right now. I just wanted to make you aware of that. We've got, I think you wanted to talk one more thing real quick, international, on the China detention centers. Is that a 15-minute conversation?
Yeah, I will do the easy version, and in the show notes, I will link the full documents. And so this is what the full documents. Once again, WikiLeaks has shun light. I think that's the word.
Sure.
You're supposed to support me more, Shane. Be like, absolutely, Banks. You're always right.
Two thumbs.
They've shone light on government doing awful things, and this one, I would hope, though I wouldn't expect consistency from either side of the American political spectrum, that both sides could acknowledge WikiLeaks did something good.
Yeah.
WikiLeaks has been so weird in that Republicans loved them, then Republicans hated them. At first it was Democrats loved them, the Democrats hated them, and they go back and forth and back and forth. It must be pretty funny.
Meanwhile, all the liberty lovers just love them to death.
Because it's just the truth.
Yeah, it confirms what our bias.
Even if they have exposed things we don't like Sorwork was actually involved in some CIA-funded magazine at some point. You guys can look that up on your own time. It's funny. His explanation is even funnier. But what they've done this time is they have uncovered 403 pages, I believe, of internal Chinese documents that provide an unprecedented look inside the crackdown on ethnic minorities in the Xinjiang region. Those ethnic minorities are, for the most part, the Uyghurs. It's a tribe, it might not be the greatest word. It's an ethnic group, Turkic ethnic group, which turned mostly Muslim during the 10th century. So it's what you've heard in not that much in the media, but every so often you've heard that the Chinese have internment camps for Muslims, basically.
So 11 centuries ago.
So this is 400 pages in Chinese, some that have been translated, of internal documents of the whole process of how this expanded over the past about decade. Different leadership has started to talk about this being a problem. Mm-hmm. You've got internal speeches that they've given to each other about the problem of these ethnic minorities who are not assimilating to Chinese culture, and who even though they're internally, there's 55 different recognized ethnic minorities in China that the government acknowledges. The Chinese government doesn't want them to say that they are a different group. They have to be Chinese, and they don't want to necessarily call themselves Chinese. And so I'll go through a little bit of just the highlight quotes, and I will link the full pages that I've read about 100 of them so far. But these are the highlights. This is the explanation to kids when they come back from school, when the kids ask where their parents have gone. They're in a training school set up by the government, the answer prescribed. If pressed, officials were told to tell students that their relatives were not criminals, yet could not leave these schools.
Wow.
The question and answer script also included a barely concealed threat. Students were told that their behavior could either shorten or extend the detention of their relatives. I'm sure that you will support them because this is for your own good, officials were advised to say, and also for their own good and also for your own good. The document warned that there was a serious possibility students might sink into turmoil after learning what happened to their relatives. It recommended that police officers in plain clothes and experienced local officials meet them as soon as they return to show humane concern and stress the rules. The directives, questions, and answer guide begins gently with officials advised to tell the students that they have absolutely no need to worry about relatives who have disappeared.
Wow.
Tuition for their period of study is free, and so are food and living costs, as the standards are quite high, officials were told to say. before adding that the authorities were spending more than $3 per day on meals for each detainee, even better than the living standards that some students have back home. So they're telling these kids or young adults who have come back from school, they're acknowledging that there's going to be a problem. Apparently, there are these towns that are just wastelands, empty, because most of the people who live there, so the parents, the adults, the owners of shops and so forth, have all been taken to these schools or internment camps, and they're acknowledging there's going to be this problem with kids come back home from school and like don't find any of their relatives.
Wow.
This one says, tell them if you want to see them, in your conclusion answer, we can arrange for you to have a video meeting. Family members, including you, must abide by the state's laws and rules and not believe or spread rumors, officials were told to say. Only then can you add points for your family member, and after a period of assessment, they can leave the school if they meet course completion standards. If asked about the impact of detentions on family finances, officials were advised to assure students that the party and the government will do everything possible to ease your hardships. The line that stands out most in the script, however, may be the model answer for how to respond to students who ask of their detained relatives, did they commit a crime?
Wow.
So if you go down the line, at first they're told to be empathetic and stress the rules, and then they've got all these kind of arguments to make things better. Your parents and your relatives being taken care of. Their standard of living is higher. We're spending $3 a day on meals, for God's sakes. What are you complaining about?
Yeah.
Don't worry if there's financial hardship. We're going to help you. And at the end, if none of these, and then there's the argument of, hey, if you cooperate and you're better, you'll give points. I don't know what those points are.
Well, it's
points to your family.
It's their social score. That's what it is, right? Like, I mean, yeah. I guarantee you that's exactly what it is.
You'll get points, and the more points you get, the higher, the faster they'll complete their standards and so forth. And then, if none of this works, it's to do a kind of mind manipulation of, well, did they commit a crime? You tell us. Are you sure they didn't commit a crime?
Wow. Golly.
It goes on and on, of course, but those are the main things that I took out of it, and I look forward to reading more. This is so scary, man.
Well, it isn't, because I'll tell you right now, they're doing the same thing here in America. They do the exact same damn thing here in America.
It's not the exact same.
So I will disagree on this part, and I don't do it to be hyperbolic or obtuse or any of that. I say that because neighborhoods and communities have been destroyed by criminalizing people, where they take people away, they put them in jails and prisons and things like that. And can you go down and visit? Yeah, but what's told to the family? Somebody shows up, most likely a cop, whether he's in plain clothes or uniform, and says, hey, man, you guys are breaking the rules. You're breaking the rules. Don't worry about them. They'll be fine in prison. Nothing bad happens in prison. The bald face lie to these kids or wives or girlfriends or whoever the loved ones are, and they do this all over America all the time. It's
okay. I take back what I said. I actually agree. I hadn't thought it from that lens. I thought you were going like the school route, but no, I agree. You've got some people there who are like, okay, you're not allowed to smoke that plant. That's a crime. But it's going to be okay. He's going to pay his debt to society. He or she, I guess, though it's mostly males in jails these days, in prisons. And he or she's going to pay their debt. We're going to rehabilitate them. Mm-hmm. They can learn some skills while they're there. Yeah. They can also be a slave and work for almost pennies on the dollar, but we're not going to mention that.
They'll get raped. I mean, it's all good. It's cool. Don't worry, man. It's all for their betterment. That's what I get at is like, hey, this is an awful, terrible story. And then you go, wait. This is actually already happening in America and has been happening, really since they upped the ante, I guess, on the war on drugs in the 1970s with Nixon and cannabis and all that. Really amped it up under Ronald Reagan. This story, I mean, yeah, is it awful? It's terrible. It is the things nightmares are made out of, but it is absolutely happening here in the United States and has been for the past, I don't know, almost 50 damn years. That's crazy.
And it happened in a more like parallel way when you talk about the internment camps of Japanese. What's interesting is I wish I had a contact in China to understand what it looks like on the ground. And I imagine in China, it looks different on the ground in lots of different places because China is so big. But I wonder what the consensus is. But there is talk in here. There's parts, and I'll just paraphrase, where they talk about, this is back in like 2014, 15, 16, before this really started as big as it is now. And they estimate about 1 million people are in these camps at this point.
So almost as many as Americans. Almost. Yeah,
I mean, I'm sure the Chinese prison system has people in jail too and prison for a bunch of stuff too. So the number might
incarceration.
Add up. But beforehand, you've got all these discussions between Chinese officials talking about how it's a terrorist problem, and the problem is that the West has put too much of an emphasis on human rights above security, and that's the reason for these terrorist attacks. And now they're talking about how there are terrorist attacks in China. You've heard about a few, the knife-wielding terrorist attacks that have killed dozens. You know, you can do damage with a knife, not just a gun. And how this is the problem. So they're creating the same thing that we create by going to Afghanistan and Iraq and bombing innocent children and families and marriages and weddings. They've now got a system that is going to perpetuate this talking point for them of, oh no, the terrorist, because now you've got people who. I don't think that violence is the best thing. You've got people, right? They call themselves the Uyghurs.
Uyghurs or something. Yeah.
Uyghurs, who have a rightful grievance of they're being kidnapped from their houses and put into prisons. I'm going to call them just prisons now, not schools anymore. And so you've got blowback. And I really feel bad for the Chinese people, like the people who are affected, because they're going to have decades and decades and decades, probably, and unfortunately, of governments using this stupid and wrong argument of, oh no, the terrorists, when it is terrorists of their own creation.
Yeah.
Just like we have had for decades and decades and decades.
Just like you know these guys who want to do a little practicing of jiu-jitsu and Aikido and Muay Thai and everything else up in Virginia. It's weird. At any rate, man, that's going to take us. That's going to take us to time. Banksy, you good?
Sorry, yeah, I'm writing notes of what to include in the show notes. But yeah, it's interesting because that actually those 4 stories we got actually tied together pretty well.
Yeah. I'm really impressed with our communication, the fact that we've got video up and running. You here on the giant screen beside me. This is the first time your head makes my head look small. I'll tell you that. Well, I can't wait to have you back in studio, man. For us here on the Rebellion, God, I'm looking forward to this Christmas season. I hope it is one of those things that you guys will continue to tune in. We're going to keep putting out shows maybe a little less serious and a lot more fun and interesting in terms of just our culture and what's going on, what interests us out there. I've got some things I want to share with you. I know Banks has probably got some same. But Banks, you got anything else to add to today's show before we sign off?
No, in general, I will actually. So on video, I'm showing this stuff. It's called Chloroseptic Max Sore Throat. I had a sore throat the past few days. It is now gone.
You didn't try the marshmallow, huh?
I did try the marshmallow a while back. Wayne told me about it.
Yeah.
Apparently, if you have a sore throat, you put some marshmallows and that helps. But if you have a sore throat, this stuff is a little expensive, but it is the best stuff to use so that while it takes a few days to heal, those days will not be miserable. So I had Thanksgiving, I had a sore throat, but I was able to have a pleasant time and not have that horrible feeling in my throat. It's called Chloroseptic Max Sore Throat. They're not a sponsor.
Brought to you by Chloroseptic.
It is just here on my desk still, and I'm very happy about them. So this has been your place for peace, liberty, and free markets and good health advice.
Yeah.
Shane, any lasting words on what people can do to support us?
Yeah, go out there and become a patron. If you found value in the show, we could definitely use a little money to grow this thing. I hear we're going to have a website here in the very near future for the sponsors to come, and they're pressing me left and right to try to become sponsors of the show. So we will have that there for you. But patreon.com/rebellionpod. Go out there and also leave us reviews. You got a lot of time during the holidays. You're going to do a little shopping. You're going to do some other things. Leave a review for the Rebellion as you travel from store to store or from app to app, whatever you're listening.
Even better, when your family comes to visit, take their iPhone and leave a review for us on their account.
And subscribe all at the same time. Outside of that, if you got anything to bring to our attention, go to info@rebellionpod.com and you can leave us a message. We will get to some things. I know I've got a list of viewer stuff that we also need to get to in this coming season, which I am really looking forward to. But until then, we love you guys. I mean, this is what we look forward to every week, is doing a couple episodes, and look forward to next week as well. This has been your place for peace, liberty, and free markets. This is the Rebellion. We love you. We need you.
Peace.
Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff.